Breaking right now on Morning News Now, diplomacy and uncertainty. This morning, President Trump on the world stage touting a win on this first full day of the NATO summit in the Netherlands. Well, in the Middle East, there's celebration and a return to some normalcy. That shaky ceasefire between Israel and Iran holding so far. But now new questions about just how much damage was done by those U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. We're going to bring you the latest. Also this morning, a stunning upset in the race for New York City's mayor. Progressive Zohran Mamdani declares victory against former Governor Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary.
Of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done. My friends, we have done it.
More on this historic win and what it could signal for the Democratic Party's future. Plus, summer sizzle. This morning, millions of people waking up to heat alerts with record highs expected from the mid-Atlantic to the Northeast. We're tracking the temperatures, the warnings, and when we can expect some relief. And capture the Flagg. NBA draft tipping off tonight. Former Duke superstar Cooper Flagg in the spotlight as the projected #1 pick. We'll have more on the excitement and what to expect from this year's top talent. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. We begin this Wednesday morning overseas. President Trump is attending the NATO summit in the Netherlands. His day began with a meeting with the NATO Secretary General as he lobbies member nations to spend more on defense. The president will meet with reporters later today before returning to the White House. This overseas visit comes as we learn more about those U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites this past weekend. An initial assessment by the Defense Intelligence Agency concludes the strikes were not as effective as President Trump initially claimed they were. That's according to 3 people with knowledge of the report. The Trump administration is pushing back against that. Before heading to NATO yesterday, Mr. Trump accused Israel and Iran of violating a ceasefire that he announced between the two nations. That deal came just hours after Iran launched a retaliatory strike against a U.S. airbase in Qatar. As of now, the fragile ceasefire does appear to be holding. In a few moments, we're going to have the latest from overseas. We'll also have analysis from an expert on the region. But let's begin with NBC News correspondent Alice Barr, who joined us from Washington. Alice, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. And already this morning, we've heard from President Trump at the NATO summit, again asserting that Iran's nuclear program was totally obliterated and that he does not believe Iran would have had time to move equipment and uranium out before the U.S. strikes. He's dismissing new questions about the extent of the damage. President Trump at the NATO summit in the Netherlands with key allies touting a diplomatic win between 2 sworn enemies as a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran appears to be holding. Recounting in flight how he urged Israel's prime minister to back off a planned retaliatory strike. At the same time, there are new questions about how effective U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites were, with a preliminary assessment by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency estimating Iran's nuclear program has been delayed by 3 to 6 months. That's according to 3 people with knowledge of the report. The White House calling that assessment flat out wrong. President Trump has repeatedly said Iran's nuclear capabilities were totally obliterated.
Iran will never rebuild its nuclear. From there, absolutely not. That place is under rock.
But one of the sources said core pieces remain intact. Questions also over what Iran may have moved from its nuclear sites before the U.S. strikes. Top Democrats in Congress accusing the Trump administration of misrepresenting the truth about the damage, questioning why the White House delayed planned briefings lawmakers have been demanding.
What are they running away from?
The head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog pointing to an important degree of visible damage.
The Iranian nuclear program has been set back significantly.
While acknowledging no one could fully assess the destruction underground at the key Fordo site, pressing Iran to resume diplomacy for a long-term solution. House Speaker Mike Johnson said his chamber would be briefed on Friday on Iran, with the Senate set to be briefed tomorrow. Joe?
All right, Alice, thank you so much. Let's bring in NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez. Raf, good morning. Let's pick it up right there with that initial assessment concluding U.S. airstrikes targeting Iran's nuclear enrichment sites this past weekend weren't as effective as President Trump initially said they were. We just heard their analysis piece. Core pieces remain intact, according to those sources. What do we know about Iran's nuclear capabilities right now?
Joe, good morning. The short answer is there's a lot we don't know, and there are a number of major unanswered questions. The first is the obvious one. How much damage was actually done to these 3 core nuclear facilities? You're looking at the aftermath of those enormous bunker buster bombs dropped on Fordo. That is the core of the Iranian nuclear program, but it is literally buried into a mountain. So these bombs are enormous, but satellites do not tell us what has happened under the surface there. Has the facility actually been destroyed? Has there been just superficial damage to the top of the mountain? Is the answer somewhere in between? We don't know, and it may be some time before we get answers to that. The other big outstanding question, Joe, is what has happened to Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium? We know that they had about 900 pounds of uranium enriched to 60% purity. That's not enriched enough for bomb grade, but it's not far off. And we simply do not know where that material is right now. 900 pounds, not a lot of it. It's easily transportable in metal containers. There are some reports that the Iranians moved it out of the Isfahan site before those American cruise missiles hit their targets. So until we get those answers, it's very difficult to calculate the big question, which is how far are the Iranians from a bomb? And it's worth saying, Joe, that U.S. intelligence found before this strike there was no indication Iran's leadership had made a decision to rush for a bomb. The other big question is, have their intentions changed? Have they decided after this American attack that they do, in fact, need a weapon to deter future strikes?
Raf, let's talk about the ceasefire between Iran and Israel. It does appear to be holding right now, despite President Trump saying yesterday both nations had violated it. Where do things stand right now between the countries, and what are the challenges in the way?
Yeah, so Joe, when we were speaking 24 hours ago, this ceasefire was looking extremely shaky. It does appear to be holding. You saw President Trump on his way to the NATO summit very firmly admonishing both Iran and Israel not to violate this deal. And it does seem that so far they're sticking to it. Both sides in their own ways have declared victory. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the right of your screen saying that this was a victory that will reverberate for generations. The Iranians are saying, look, they withstood a joint assault by both the United States and Israel, and their government is still standing, which is victory in and of itself. It's worth saying, Joe, both sides have incentives for this war to come to an end. For Israel, they've had ballistic missiles crashing down. Their airspace has been closed. The economy shut down. So as much as they are touting this as a victory, Prime Minister Netanyahu may have wanted this to come to an end. And for Iran, you know, this was a potentially regime-destroying event for them, and just the fact that they're still standing at the end will be some comfort for the Ayatollah.
There are also some questions now, Raf, about Israel's military. The U.S. has helped defend Israel against Iranian attacks, we know, over the last couple of weeks. But now it's been reported Israel's military is running low on some key weaponry. That is according to 3 U.S. officials. What more can you tell us about what we're learning?
Yeah, remember, so Israel has been fighting Iran in this hot war for 12 days, but it has been fighting since October 7th, more than a year and a half ago. It's been dropping a huge number of bombs, not just in Iran, but also in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Yemen. And it has been using an enormous number of those missile interceptors to stop rockets and ballistic missiles that have been incoming into Israel. Israel is not a big country. It doesn't have a huge domestic production base. And there are real questions right now about how many of those missile interceptors Israel has left and how long they could continue fighting at this pace.
Right. Raf Sanchez. Raf, thank you so much. For more perspective on this ceasefire, let's bring in Alex Vitanka. He is a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute specializing in Iran. Alex, good to have you with us. So we saw a lot of back and forth yesterday shortly after the ceasefire was announced. It culminated in those strong words from President Trump. He literally used an expletive while speaking with reporters, accusing both Israel and Iran of violating the agreement. What do you think moved the needle for each side to commit to this deal and have it at least hold for the past 24 hours?
Great to be with you. Look, I mean, from the Iranian perspective, you could tell by listening to official statements from Tehran, pretty much from get-go, that they wanted this war to come to an end. Because frankly, they had been taken by surprise. They were getting ready for a protracted diplomatic track, potentially, and then yet suddenly on the 13th of June, they were hit. So they weren't ready for this war, and they've certainly never been preparing for such an intense campaign as we've witnessed by Israel, United States. So Iran wanted a ceasefire from get-go. United States, as soon as, sort of, if you will, the Trump administration says that diplomatic efforts had been exhausted and took out those 3 nuclear sites, we heard from the Trump White House saying now it's time for peace. Israel's position, that's the one probably most debated. Are the Israelis happy now? The nuclear sites have been taken out, at least for now, or was Israel's end game essentially regime change? Because if it was regime change Israel wanted, well, we're not at a regime change point yet, if that ever comes around the corner. So the question is, what brought Israel to agree to the ceasefire? And I can only assume President Trump spoke to them forcefully and said, look, you'll be on your own without us. And the Israelis recognized they couldn't be in this fight with Iran long-term without the United States, and they too agreed to the ceasefire.
You know, the Middle East region is known for forever wars where tensions between countries could escalate at any moment. This ceasefire, do you think it's going to hold? Will it last long-term?
Impossible to say, really, because, you know, we have to look at the bigger context here. We just, Raf, your correspondent, just pointed out, this is a campaign, a conflict going back to 1979, essentially, with the Iranian Revolution. So much of this is about politics. It's not about nuclear capabilities of what Iran has or the military capabilities of Israel. Look, the Israelis can't bring the Iranian regime down militarily. So the best way forward to preserve this ceasefire, or, you know, make it stronger, if you will, and create a roadmap going forward, those are all political questions, not military ones. So that's where we're, you know, have to wait and see. I watch what the Iranians are doing. Seems to be a debate brewing of sorts in terms of how they got into this conflict in the first place and how they can prevent another one. But I don't really know if that fight between the hardliners and so-called moderates, who wins that one in Tehran. And obviously, we also have to take into account what U.S. and Israel's next steps will be, and that will obviously be shaped what the Iranians will do.
I want to ask you more about what we've been discussing just moments ago this morning. Those reports, sources familiar with early assessment of the damage from those U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites say set back the program for several months. That's far from the total obliteration President Trump claimed earlier this week. Are you surprised by that assessment? I mean, given what we know about Iran's nuclear program, the ability to move and hide nuclear material, was this a situation that was ever going to be solved with one bombing mission?
Of all the nuclear crises we've seen in recent decades, certainly the ones involving Israel, say in Iraq in '81, in Syria 2007, when they successfully ended those countries' nuclear programs, this is a very different beast, if you will. Iran's nuclear program is scattered across a country the size of Alaska, over 2 dozen probably nuclear sites, and probably sites that we don't know of. So the idea that one military mission from above, without boots on the ground, will bring it to an end was always far-fetched. But I mean, obviously, in terms of the main sites, damage has been brought. I can't sit here from Washington and tell you exactly what is happening inside that mountain in terms of damage. But what I can tell you is if politically the Iranians decide the lesson they take from this attack by the United States is actually to have a nuclear weapon, they have the technician, they have the resources, and they have to some extent some support from the Russians, the Chinese, and others to do it. A high-risk strategy on their part. I hope they're going to come back and talk to the Trump administration, look for a diplomatic solution, but they might make another decision that for their own security, weaponizing what's left of the nuclear program is the best way forward for them.
All right. Alex Vatanka, appreciate your expertise. Thanks for joining us this morning. Here in New York, Zohran Mamdani, a relative political newcomer, is on course to become the Democratic Party's nominee for city mayor. He declared victory in yesterday's primary election. It is a stunning upset and a rebuke of the party establishment. After all, Mamdani is a progressive state assemblyman, a Democratic socialist. He took a commanding lead after first-choice votes were tallied, beating his nearest rival, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo had been the frontrunner throughout the campaign, but conceded the election last night as those results came in. We don't expect to get the final results until next week. That's because New York uses ranked choice voting, which does take longer to tally. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona joins us now to talk more about this. So, Mel, Mamdani, virtually unknown when this contest began, at least beyond where he represented in New York, he has surged in the past few weeks. How did he manage to pull off this surprise victory? What did he have to say last night?
Yeah, this was a political earthquake for a number of reasons. He is a relative newcomer. He's young. He's a Democratic socialist. But the way he was able to pull off a victory is through both the style and substance of his campaign. On style, he ran a really modern campaign. You saw him teaming up with influencers and doing these viral social media clips. Very different than Andrew Cuomo, for example, who ran a much more traditional establishment campaign, relying on endorsements and unions and big money. And then on the substance, he ran on things like free childcare, free buses, city-run groceries, freezes on rent. And he also really leaned into the desire in the Democratic Party, particularly in the base right now, to see some change, to shake up the status quo, and to lean into the fight with Donald Trump. Here's what he had to say last night.
The mayor will use their power to reject Donald Trump's fascism, to stop mass ICE agents from deporting our neighbors, to govern our city as a model for the Democratic Party, a party where we fight for working people with no apology. A life of dignity should not be reserved for a fortunate few. It should be one that city government guarantees for each and every New Yorker.
And that is a very different tone than the current mayor, Eric Adams, who has really tried to partner with the Trump administration, try to curry favor with the Trump administration. And we should also point out that the DOJ did drop its corruption case against Adams, who is now running as an independent this fall.
What did we hear from Andrew Cuomo during his concession speech? And where does this leave the former New York governor's attempt at a political comeback? I mean, could he still decide to run in the general election?
Yeah, he absolutely could. We were looking for clues in his concession speech last night about his plans. He was very gracious in conceit. He complimented the Assemblyman, even though he'd grown very bitter in the final days and the closing days of the campaign. He had nothing but nice things to say about Mamdani, said it's his night and he ran a great campaign. He did not sound committed, though, to running as an independent in the general election. He said they're going to take some look at the tally, because they still need to tally up the ranked choice voting, and they're going to make some tough decisions. So not totally on board just yet. It is still a possibility, but just unclear at this moment what this means for the Cuomo political comeback.
And Mel, many people saw this election as an indicator of where voters want to see the Democratic Party headed next, either to the middle or to the left. Is the message here for the party to move toward a more progressive direction, and just what's been the broader reaction from Democrats?
Yeah, so obviously Democrats have been wrestling with that exact question, Joe, since the crushing November election. They've been debating whether they need to move more to the center to try to appeal to moderates and independents who fled the party, or if they need to pursue more radical policies as the only foil to the radical and extreme policies on the right. New York City, obviously a very blue, very liberal city, so I'm not sure that other battleground places are going to necessarily be looking to replicate the Democratic Socialist platform and playbook that we saw from Mamdani. But I will say, if there's one thing that Democrats may try to take away from what we saw last night, and I've already heard this from a few Democrats that I was checking in with after this election victory last night, is that he ran relentlessly on free items, on the cost of living, on bringing down the cost of living for everyday Americans. So that is certainly something that Democrats might try to replicate in future elections.
And of course, we'll have a better gauge of perhaps where things are when we have the general election later this year with Eric Adams on the ballot there. Melanie, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Millions of Americans are hoping Mother Nature will turn the thermostat down at least a little today, but this blistering, unrelenting heat wave is not over yet. 124 million people are expected to be under heat alerts today. On Tuesday, triple-digit temperatures during yesterday's peak set daily records in cities like Boston and New York. Well, the worst of it may be behind us. You can still expect to see even more record highs today all up and down the East Coast. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has more on how people are coping with this summer swelter.
A triple-digit heat wave is hammering people in some of the nation's largest cities. From New York,
we left Florida, we came north to get away from the heat.
And it's worse here.
And it's worse here.
To the nation's capital, where the Washington Monument remains closed for a second straight day.
It's the feeling of like walking into an oven.
It is really hot.
The summer's first blistering stretch also prompting a very high heat risk at the Grand Canyon and turning deadly. Officials in St. Anne, Missouri confirming a woman dying in her house due to dangerous heat after having no water or air conditioning for at least 3 days. While in Massachusetts, 2 firefighters hospitalized after suffering heat exhaustion, battling flames. As many parts of the East Coast have had to cope with power outages. At its peak, tens of thousands in the region losing access to AC.
A second ago, you pulled up your phone. What did it show?
100 degrees.
So we have hit triple digits here.
Yes.
Yes.
And you guys have what right now? Or what don't you have at this hour?
No electricity.
Donna Masucci and her Roselle Park, New Jersey neighbor Jay Boff are relying on a generator with no power since midnight. At the same time, they can handle the electricity limbo.
The more elderly, older people that have medical conditions, the ones that need to run equipment for their health.
That would be top of mind in a situation like this.
Sure. Concern elevated in public spaces, too. At least 5 people needed treatment from heat-related injuries after a K-pop concert in D.C. And a Northeast transportation bedrock, Amtrak, announcing temperature-related speed restrictions from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. Some speed bumps, as some relief could be in store later in the week, though it's little comfort to those suffering through the suffocating heat now. Sam Brock, NBC News.
And the sizzling summer heat continues today, so let's get a check on how long it's going to stick around with meteorologist Michelle Grossman. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. And the good news is relief is on the way. Not today, though. We're looking at temperatures still above normal. Yesterday was the peak of the heat. We broke so many records yesterday, so many records on Monday. We're going to break more records today, and then this should be the last of it before we start to see that relief. So still 124 million people under heat alerts. We have heat advisories in the orange, excessive extreme heat warnings in the pink. That includes places like Norfolk, Raleigh, also Charleston, West Virginia, and Pittsburgh. We will once again see temperatures well above normal, but this is the good news. We have this big area of high pressure. It's a cool Canadian high pressure. That's going to start to sink to the south. Today, we still have that heat dome tacked in place. We've been talking about this heat dome for days. Unfortunately, it's tacked, but it's going to start to be on the move later on today. And then there's that boundary that's going to separate us between that cooler air and that warmer air. So as we go throughout the day, there's that slow retreat of that heat dome, that Canadian high moving further to the south. And we're going to see cooler temperatures in the extreme portions of northern New England and also the Gulf Coast states, but the big relief comes tomorrow. Today, this is what it looks like. Burlington, Vermont, we're looking at 83. That's better than where they have been. 89, still warm in Boston. You factor in the heat, it's going to feel warmer in some places. It's going to feel warmer in New York City. It will feel like 100 degrees. That's what you want to dress for as you head out. 90s in D.C., Pittsburgh, Charleston, West Virginia, also in Indianapolis. But look what happens tomorrow. There's that boundary sinking to the south, that big area of high pressure, that Canadian high pressure, kind of takes hold. That clockwise direction brings that cooler air off the ocean. So we're going to see cooler temperatures tomorrow. It's going to feel really nice in New York City, 79 degrees tomorrow. That's 18 degrees colder than where we have been. So temperatures plummeting 10 to 20 degrees. And notice all those 70s compared to 90s and 100s. We're looking at 78 degrees in Buffalo, 74 in Albany, 84 in Scranton, and 72 in portions of New England. So south of this, we're still sizzling. We're looking at temperatures in D.C. Tomorrow, 94. It's really kind of where you are. It's all about location. And we're looking at temperatures still in the 90s as we head further to the south. But that's more expected, right?
Yeah.
These temperatures to the south, we're getting back to normal in portions of the Mid-Atlantic and New England and the Northeast.
I'm glad we're above the line.
Yes,
that
above
line,
the line.
whatever it is, I'm glad
Yes.
I'm above it right now.
Me
Michelle,
too.
thank you so much.
Sure.
A crew of 4 international astronauts launched into orbit early this morning on the maiden voyage of a brand new SpaceX Dragon capsule. The launch of a Falcon 9 rocket pierced the night sky around 2:30 this morning from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It's the 4th mission by commercial space company Axiom Space. They work with SpaceX and NASA to bring private crews to the International Space Station. Axiom Mission 4 is expected to dock to the ISS lab tomorrow morning, where the crew will conduct nearly 60 experiments over the course of 2 weeks. On board is former NASA chief astronaut Peggy Whitson and 3 new astronauts from India, Poland, and Hungary. They're also the first people in space from those respective countries. We'll be keeping an eye on their journey. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, researchers discover another potential benefit of those popular weight loss drugs, why they say they could help fight dementia. Up first after the break, new developments in the federal sex trafficking trial of rap mogul Sean Diddy Combs as the prosecution and defense rest their cases. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Federal prosecutors rested their case Tuesday against Sean Diddy Combs, who faces sex trafficking and racketeering charges. It caps off 6 weeks of evidence against the hip-hop musician. His defense team called no witnesses, only entering in some text messages as evidence before they rested. Combs denies the charges and declined to testify. WNBC's Erica Byfield has the latest.
Sean Combs will not take the stand, standing up, telling the judge, "That is my decision, Your Honor. That is solely my decision. It's a decision I made with my lawyer. I made it freely." The 55-year-old entertainment star on trial for sex trafficking and racketeering. He's pleaded not guilty. On Tuesday, the government's final witness was back on the stand. The special agent's testimony meant to help the jury understand all the documents in the prosecution's case. During his cross-examination, the jury saw more of that freak-off footage, videos showing alleged victim only identified as Jane, Combs, and various escorts. They saw about 10 minutes of clips. Combs at times glancing at the jury. With the federal agent answering questions, the defense highlighted hundreds of messages that Jane and Combs exchanged before and after those sex acts. Jane in May of 2023 writing, "I love you, baby, and I thank God for you every day." After that, the defense took aim at the RICO allegation, pushing the idea that Combs didn't have a co-conspirator, worked to hide the sexual experiences from his staff. Combs texting an escort, "Hold up, the staff is outside, and they're leaving now." Yet earlier, the jury saw messages showing that Combs' staff helped set up and clean up those encounters. After the government rested its case, the defense announced the government has failed to meet its burden and no jury could find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, asking the judge to toss the entire case, the government saying, "We think the case should be presented to the jury." The judge not making a decision yet.
Our thanks to WNBC's Erica Byfield for that report. It appears likely the jury will get the case soon. They're slated to hear closing arguments starting tomorrow. Later today, in another federal courtroom, this one in Memphis, the legal battle over Kilmar Abrego Garcia will take center stage. The Maryland father was, by the Trump administration's own admission, mistakenly deported to a dangerous prison in El Salvador back in March. When he finally returned to the U.S. earlier this month, he was hit with federal human trafficking charges. He has pleaded not guilty. On Sunday, a federal judge ordered Abrego's release while he awaits trial for those charges. Then hours later, the government filed an appeal asking to keep him in custody. NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach joins me now for the latest on all this. So, Gary, good morning. What is at stake for Abrego today, and what are both sides preparing to argue?
Hey there, Joe. Good morning from Nashville. Yeah, so today is all about Kilmar Abrego Garcia's conditions of release. And after a magistrate judge ruled on Sunday that he was able to be released while awaiting trial. Now, today's also about whether or not he actually walks out of this courthouse a free man. We expect the hearing to be fairly brief, and we expect it to focus on what Abrego has to do while he's awaiting trial on these federal smuggling charges. This may include anger management counseling, regulating contact with his wife, who you see there, restricting his travel to Maryland and here to the courthouse in Nashville for court appearance. And in a last-minute effort yesterday, the Department of Justice actually tried to argue essentially against themselves, against the Trump administration, saying the judge should reconsider his order releasing him from federal custody because they're concerned if he's deported from the U.S., of course, he won't be able to face these charges. As the DOJ said in their filing, the United States cannot try a fugitive. Joe?
So, Gary, in that ruling just a few days ago, what did the federal magistrate have to say about this trafficking case against Abrego?
So she wasn't thrilled with the lack of evidence that the government had presented against Abrego, saying it was largely based on hearsay, second sources, third-hand sources here. There's also the evidence of the traffic stop here in Tennessee that was from several years ago. It was caught on camera. There's questions about the motives of the police officers in that video as well, Joe.
And odds are good if he is released from federal custody, Abrego would then be detained by ICE for deportation proceedings. Of course, before these federal charges, the federal government was ordered to bring him back from El Salvador, that order coming from the Supreme Court. Why would he then be arrested again?
So there are two different tracks here, right? There's the federal court fight, which we're here in Nashville today for, and then there's what we expect to be this immigration court fight. Because he did come into this country illegally in the first place, he's subject to undergo removal proceedings. And we've seen this over and over again with folks getting charged federally and then picked up by ICE to undergo removal proceedings. We've seen this for several months now. And there's only one country, as we remember, that Abrego cannot be deported to, according to a 2019 court order, and that's El Salvador, Joe.
Is there any any scenario where he does walk out of court a free man today? I mean, what is next after today's hearing?
So given the emphasis from the Trump administration that we've seen on immigration enforcement, it really feels unlikely that they're going to let somebody as high profile as Kilmar Abrego Garcia, given his story, who's many ways become the face of Trump's immigration enforcement efforts, walk free out of this courthouse here in Nashville today. In terms of what's next on the federal side, he's going to face these federal charges for as long as he's physically here in the United States. Joe.
Gary Grumbach, we know you'll be reporting on this all day. Thank you so much. Now, as the Trump administration pushes forward with its mass deportation program, a massive new migrant detention camp is being built deep in the Florida Everglades. Some officials are calling it Alligator Alcatraz. The name suggests that the swamp's wildlife will actually prevent migrants from trying to escape. Some critics, though, are calling it inhumane. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has the details.
Construction is underway deep in the Florida Everglades on a massive migrant detention camp that state officials are calling Alligator Alcatraz. Starting next month, 5,000 migrants will be housed in trailers and heavy-duty tents at this remote, abandoned airfield.
As I call it, Alligator Alcatraz.
In a promotional video set to music, Florida's Attorney General lays out what he considers a deterrent for any potential escapees.
People get out, there's not much waiting for them other than alligators and pythons.
But some local officials warn the environmental impact could be devastating.
We have environmental and physical stewardship and safety concerns.
The Trump administration has said it wants to get up to 100,000 beds at detention centers across the country to facilitate mass deportations.
A lot of bad people were let into our country. We're getting them out, and we're getting them out fast.
The Department of Homeland Security says the new facility will cost about $450 million a year and will be reimbursed in large part by a FEMA program previously used to shelter migrants in places like this hotel in New York City. Do you think that this is a good idea for your home state?
Well, I 100% support the president's deportation efforts. It's the president's priority to get those individuals out of our country.
But immigrant advocates argue the money has not been set aside by Congress. And
the biggest concern is the grave inhumanity that seems to be at stake in terms of sending people to incredibly inhumane, brutal conditions.
An administration official tells NBC News that ICE currently has nearly 60,000 detainees in custody, a record.
All right, Gabe, thank you. Developing news now out of Gaza, where Israeli officials say several soldiers were killed by a surprise blast. NBC News international correspondent Danielle Hamamdjian joins us with that and what else is making news around the world this morning. Danielle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. A particularly deadly day for Israeli forces in Gaza on Tuesday. 7 Israeli soldiers were killed when an explosive device attached to their armored personnel carrier was detonated. On the same day, the UN announced that more than 400 Palestinians had been killed in just under a month while trying to get aid, saying they're having to choose between starving to death or risk being killed while trying to get food. Now to Indonesia, where the fate of a hiker caught the attention of an entire country. A Brazilian woman who slipped and fell off a cliff while hiking around the nation's second highest volcano was trapped for nearly 4 days before she was found dead. And finally, just another low-key Louis Vuitton Paris fashion show with none other than Beyoncé and her hubby Jay-Z, naturally in coordinated Western looks. Wrapping up her Cowboy Carter tour just a couple of days ago, guess who appeared on stage? That's right, Jay-Z, rapping his bit of the song Crazy in Love, with fans losing their minds, Joe,
Yep.
Rightfully so.
That's a fashion show with a bonus there. All right, Danielle, thank you so much. Coming up, contamination concerns. Researchers sounding the alarm on plastic packaging and the food you eat. Dr. Azar is in with what you should know. Your weekly checkup is next here on Morning News Now. We're back with our weekly medical checkup. This week, we're diving into a new study showing how plastic food packaging could be contaminating your food. Plus, more on those popular weight loss drugs and what new research says about how they might lower your risk of developing dementia. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar joins us to discuss these health headlines. Dr. Azar, good to have you with us. So let's talk about this research on microplastics. A new study looked at how plastic packaging and products could be contaminating our food. So is there any packaging that's worse than others, and what are some of the things we can do to maybe keep keep ourselves safe?
Yeah, so, okay, look, plastics are ubiquitous. We are exposed to them in our environment all the time. We always talk about, is our exposure through food? Is it through the water or through the soil? This study was really looking at plastics, the way we normally and intend to use them, and how that could be contributing to our exposure. And in fact, what they found, that plastic packaging that holds our food is definitely a source of these micro and nanoplastics. And something that was interesting was this repeated use of plastic increases the risk. So, for example, every single time you open and close your bottle of water, you are actually allowing some of those plastics to seep into the water that you're drinking from your innocent little Evian or Poland Spring bottle. So doctors' orders are, to the degree that you can, you want to avoid plastic products and use them only once. I think one of the biggest changes people can make, you carry around, instead of your plastic water bottle, a reusable water bottle made of metal. One of the biggest things, Joe, is not putting those plastic Tupperware in the microwave or in the dishwasher. That heating up can allow those plastics to leach. But look, you can't eliminate it 100%, but maybe these tiny things that you can make a change every day could make a difference in the long run.
And I'm just thinking of all the times I open up the little lid
right.
and
so if you're sitting at your desk and you have a bottle of plastic water, open it, leave it open.
Just leave it open.
Exactly.
All right, I hadn't even thought about that. All right, let's talk about popular weight loss drugs.
Yeah.
Every study comes out just shows more and more of the benefits, this time lowering the risk of dementia. Explain the link here.
Yeah, so I think we start with, well, the headline is individuals with type 2 diabetes who were on semaglutide, that's the active ingredient in Ozempic or Wegovy, over a 3-year period had a lower risk of developing what's called Alzheimer's-related dementia, and specifically something called vascular dementia. So if you think, too, the risk factors for dementia include things like obesity and heart disease and type 2 diabetes. If you are lowering the incidence of those things by those medications, maybe you are actually offsetting that potential risk. That, plus the fact that medicines like Ozempic and Wegovy also reduce inflammation. Inflammation is a big driver of dementia as well. So my doctor's orders, asking about options and lifestyle changes are helpful too. Obviously, semaglutide use and tirzepatide, their use has become almost ubiquitous, but we're going to see, in addition to their potential benefits in reducing weight and type 2 diabetes, this is yet one more thing in a long laundry list of things that could potentially be beneficial. But here's the thing, 45% of dementia cases can be preventable by modifying risk factors. So those diseases, obesity, heart disease, et cetera, it's not all of it. It's also healthy diet. It's not smoking. It's all of those other things. Obviously, genetics and age we can't modify, but there's a lot of things we can modify. This is one more little checkbox that could potentially help.
But even if you're not on those drugs, there are things you can always do.
Exactly.
Right. Let's talk about music. We know can have a strong effect on us. Well, now we have researchers at Rice University and UCLA found it can boost your memory, but only if the music moves you.
So this one was interesting, and this launched a little bit of a deep dive for me in terms of memory and music and Alzheimer's. And there's already quite a bit of research on how music can positively affect individuals with Alzheimer's. And in this particular study, they wanted to see how a person's reaction to music affected their memory. And they basically determined or found out that if you had a very strong emotional response to music, you kind of had a memory of the general event. But if you had sort of a more moderate response to the music, you remembered details more of that event, which I thought was really interesting. Suffice it to say, doctor's orders are create your personal playlists or for your loved ones, because someone certainly with advanced dementia is not going to be doing this for themselves, and do what works for you. But I think this is another, again, sort of like checkbox of how music can very positively affect people with Alzheimer's. And one thing, I don't know if you've ever noticed with an older person, if you ask them to sing happy birthday, they can still sing that. Yeah. So there's a part of memory that's retained even in Alzheimer's disease, and also that music can kind of tap into that and allow people to remember things, even if it's just a little bit, to remember an event would be really nice for folks.
I've seen powerful stories told over the years of people, even in late stages of Alzheimer's, who still remember important songs from their lives.
Exactly.
All right, Dr. Azar, great segment. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Coming up, a mid-air emergency raising questions about airline safety.
Frankly, it's nothing short of a miracle that no one died.
Up next, we're going to take you to Capitol Hill, where the head of the NTSB says two parties are to blame for a close call last year, plus what airlines are doing to try and make flying safer. And the future of the NBA is looking bright and taking center stage in Brooklyn tonight. What to expect from this year's draft class? Don't bounce. This is Morning News Now. A new update on the federal investigation into an Alaska Airlines flight that suffered a mid-air blowout last year. During a hearing yesterday, the chair of the NTSB said it could have ended in disaster, calling it a miracle no one died, adding that both Boeing and the FAA bear responsibility. Well, now the question is whether the cultures at Boeing and the FAA have changed enough to prevent another close call. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello has the details.
It was a terrifying emergency, a hole in the side of an Alaska Airlines 737 after a door plug blew out midair. One passenger feared her baby would be pulled from her arms.
Frankly, it's nothing short of a miracle that no one died or sustained serious physical injuries.
At an NTSB hearing, investigators detailed a systematic breakdown in Boeing's quality control, noting Boeing still has no record of when the plane's door plug, covering an unused emergency exit, was removed on the assembly line to fix bad rivets. NTSB video shows how the plug should have been reinstalled, but the one employee who knew how to do it was on vacation at the time. The plug was reinstalled without the bolts to hold it in place. Alaska's CEO showed us firsthand.
It makes me angry, Tom. Boeing is better than this.
Boeing has since designed a new system to prevent the door plug from moving. But the NTSB also found that FAA inspectors on site had failed to properly audit Boeing. Your experts testified that the FAA really wasn't conducting the oversight that they were supposed to be conducting.
They were not.
Is that shocking?
Yes, because the regulator is the last line of defense when it comes to safety.
The FAA says it has fundamentally changed how it oversees Boeing with more staff and audits. Boeing says it continues to regret the accident, and it says it is continuing to strengthen safety and quality. But the NTSB warns a mindset change with executives doesn't always filter down to the assembly line. Back to you.
Tom, thank you. Let's take a look at what's making news on Wall Street. Walmart reportedly shopping for some new ways to speed up your online delivery. CNBC's Silvana Henao has that with your Money Minute. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. So Walmart is, of course, looking to speed up deliveries, and this is by opening up these so-called dark stores, which resemble regular stores, but they are close to the public. Now, Bloomberg reports these locations will carry popular items, expanding the reach of existing stores and bigger warehouses to help Walmart cover a wider delivery area. Now, the company expects its online business to be profitable this year after investing billions of dollars to compete with Amazon. Meanwhile, Starbucks is simplifying how it charges for extra syrup, sauces, or powders added to a customer's drink order. Bloomberg reports starting Tuesday, it will charge a flat fee of 80 cents for any combination. Now, certain extras such as matcha powder, chai concentrate, and dried fruit, those will be priced by portion. Starbucks is also testing a feature in its mobile app to show customers price changes when they modify a beverage to improve transparency and speed up service. And demand for this so-called fast tech or cheap electronics that are used and often tossed aside is growing. A UK nonprofit group called Material Focus is working to reduce e-waste. It's singling out battery-operated minifans as an example, with more than 7 million bought by consumers last year. The group says spending on this fast tech has quadrupled since 2023, although these devices are typically small. They do contain materials such as copper that can be damaging to the environment when they're thrown out, Joe.
Always important to keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
Silvana, thanks so much. Tonight, basketball's brightest prospects hope to hear their name called so they can walk across the stage and claim their first professional jersey at this year's NBA draft. It is one of the most anticipated nights in basketball when we get to see how the future of the NBA will start to take shape. And while everyone knows who the #1 pick will be, Teams across the league are welcoming the next generation of stars. With a look ahead to tonight's draft, I'm joined by Front Office Sports Today's Baker Machado. Baker, good to have you with us again. So, all right, so you look at the odds here. The Dallas Mavericks got the #1 pick. They had a 1.8% chance in the lottery of getting it, so lucky them.
Yes, really.
We know who they're going to go with. They're going to go with Cooper Flagg. Is this a good match for them?
Absolutely. Yes, and as you mentioned, this is the surefire thing. Everybody knows what's going to happen with the #1 pick, Cooper Flagg, who a lot of people would say the best Duke freshman to ever come out of the university, and there's a lot of good players to come out of Duke, which is really saying something. But he's really going to be not just the face of this franchise, but also one of the many faces of the league. And also Cooper Flagg got the coveted LeBron James endorsement this week when LeBron said, I think he's going to be amazing. Now, Dallas Mavericks fans are very excited for this. They've already said that they've sold $8 million in new season ticket sales for the anticipation of Cooper Flagg, given the fact that there was so much anger about what had happened with Luka Doncic and that trade that went to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now a lot of Mavericks fans a lot happier now with what they're going to get in Cooper Flagg.
And considering the season just ended, they're already selling that many tickets. That's a pretty good sign. All right, so beyond Cooper, how's the rest of the class looking?
Look, #2 pick, this seems like this is also going to be a surefire expectation here. Is the San Antonio Spurs going to be selecting Dylan Harper from Rutgers? He's the point guard, about 18 years old. He's averaged about 19 points per game. He's also the son of Ron Harper, the former Chicago Bulls star during the great Michael Jordan days. But after #2, this is where things start to get a little interesting. The 76ers have the 3rd pick, but nobody really knows what they're going to do there. They might take VJ Edgecombe, who is the Big 12 Freshman of the Year from Baylor. Could they take Con Kneppel, the freshman from Duke, or even Jeremiah Fears from Oklahoma? Or could they trade that pick? That's one thing a lot of people have even speculated there. Ace Bailey, one of the other big guards from Rutgers, also really, really good, but hasn't done a lot of workouts with some other teams. So he could go anywhere from 3 to 10. So a lot of sort of questions of where things could go after #2.
All right, you were here on Monday talking about the NBA Finals. After that, we chatted with Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams. You might have heard of a fascinatingly entertaining conversation. They were coy when you ask, hey, is this the beginning of a dynasty? They've got 2 first-round picks after winning the NBA championship. Pretty good for that.
I mean, not only do they have 2 first-round picks, they have 20 draft picks over the next 6 years. And as you mentioned, 2 tonight, #15, and they could be the big surprise tonight. They could actually trade into the top 10 to continue this young dynasty that they've built after winning the NBA Finals just a few days ago. So if you see a player like Ace Bailey, who I just mentioned from Rutgers, if he slides a little bit, maybe Oklahoma City trades in to get him.
All right, Baker Machado, good to have you with us.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you so much. Coming up, a foul-mouthed parrot, ruffling feathers, and yet winning hearts.
If you call him a pretty bird, he'll say thank you. He'll say good morning, baby. That's as far as the niceties go.
Yep, up next, we're going to introduce you to a colorful bird whose colorful vocabulary may have just helped him find a forever home. Don't fly off. This is Morning News Now. We end this hour with a pet up for adoption that should probably come with a parental advisory sticker. NBC's Stephanie Gosk introduces us to this foul-mouthing bird and the hunt for his forever home.
Hendrix the macaw could use some love.
He was being fed human cereal, white bread. That's why he's missing most of his feathers. It's malnutrition.
A Massachusetts animal shelter hoping to find the bird a new home. He whistles and he talks.
Cracker. If you call him a pretty bird, he'll say thank you. He'll say good morning, baby.
But Hendrix is no show pony. Let's slow that down. Mother is the first half. The second half has to be bleeped for propriety. Hendrix is a pretty bird with a truck driver mouth.
The first time I heard him drop the MFR word, it was the first thing I thought of was snakes on a plane.
Animal shelter employee Chantel Rogers was not specific on which scene, but we are nearly certain she means this one.
Enough is enough! I have had it with these mother snakes on this mother plane!
Not a movie for kids, and neither is this bird. The shelter warning potential owners that Hendrix is rated R, and you're basically adopting Samuel L. Jackson.
We didn't want somebody to bring him home, and then all of a sudden he starts throwing slurs around, and you had no idea you were getting into this.
Along with the F-bombs, they say there is the occasional what the hell used in the correct context, One can only imagine what that may mean. Perhaps not surprisingly, the unique pet on offer generated lots of interest.
We were getting applications from Kansas. We were getting emails from people in Canada that want to adopt him.
Hendricks was dropped off by his previous owner who had him for 20 years. Maybe the profanity just became too much. So the staff is doing its best to model gentility, but it's hard.
We try not to react because we don't want to encourage it, but there's times we have to leave the room to laugh.
The animal shelter says they have found a new owner, a woman in southern Maine promising to take good care of him. She'll likely get a few good laughs in return. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News.
He's like, yeah, I'm done.
Redefines what it means to give someone the bird. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now. Good Wednesday morning. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. Right now on Morning News Now, President Trump on the world stage touting those strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities to NATO allies in the Netherlands. But a new government report suggests the attacks were actually less effective than the administration claimed. It's all as that shaky ceasefire between Israel and Iran appears to hold steady. We're covering it all. Also this morning, a sweltering start to summer for millions along the East Coast. Dangerously high temps breaking records in dozens of cities. But when might Mother Nature tell the heat to beat it? We've got your full forecast in just a moment. Plus, a political earthquake right here in New York City. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo bowing to progressive favorite Zohran Mamdani overnight as America's largest city plots its course for a new mayor. What Mamdani's stunning upset could mean for the future of the Democratic Party in NYC and across the country. And later in the hour, the future of space exploration taking flight this morning with a historic crew on board. They're tasked with helping pioneer a floating science lab hundreds of miles above the Earth. We begin this hour in the Netherlands, where this morning President Trump is taking part in the NATO summit. His day began with a meeting with the country's king and queen before meeting with the NATO secretary. All of this as the conflict between Iran and Israel remains in the forefront. That ceasefire announced by Mr. Trump on Monday does appear to be holding, even though the president claimed just 24 hours ago that both nations had violated it. The ceasefire was announced hours after Iran retaliated against the U.S. in response to the U.S. striking Iranian nuclear facilities over the past weekend. But according to sources, those strikes on Iran were not as effective as originally thought. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Hake is traveling with the president. He has the latest from the Netherlands.
The war between Israel and Iran dominated the early part of the president's day here, with President Trump arguing that his decision to bomb those nuclear sites was an historic one that ended this conflict before it could escalate any further. On that intelligence report, the president dismissed it as early, inaccurate, and almost beside the point, sounding an optimistic note that Iran would abandon its nuclear ambitions and that this fragile ceasefire will hold.
President Trump taking center stage this morning at a summit of NATO allies, touting the weekend airstrikes he ordered against Iranian nuclear targets as the conflict's decisive moment.
That hit ended the war. That hit ended the war.
And assessing the fragile ceasefire forged between Iran and Israel since, still seemingly holding today, after a phone call the president made from Air Force One to Israel's prime minister Tuesday, urging him to call off a planned airstrike.
And they brought the planes back, and it was a great thing, and it's going very well.
The president also pushing back hard against an initial assessment by the Defense Intelligence Agency that U.S. airstrikes on 3 Iranian nuclear sites were less effective than the administration has claimed, setting back Iran's nuclear program by only 3 to 6 months, according to 3 people with knowledge of the report.
They really don't know. I think Israel's going to be telling us very soon. We hear it was obliteration. It was a virtual obliteration.
Trump arguing the Iranians will have no appetite for continuing their nuclear program after a bruising 12-day war.
I don't think they'll ever do it again. I mean, they just went through hell. I think they've had it. The last thing they want to do is enrich.
Leaving the White House, the president also flashing frustration at both Israel and Iran for testing the tenuous ceasefire.
We basically have 2 countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the
they're doing.
The president arriving in the Netherlands late Tuesday for a NATO summit that will see him in Europe for less than 24 hours. Here in the Netherlands, the president's attention will be divided, with the summit set to focus on increasing allies' defense spending, a longtime Trump priority, and Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. Trump expected to meet with Ukraine's President Zelensky here today, after canceling a planned sit-down at last week's G7, flying home early instead to address the Middle East crisis.
Well, we'll discuss the obvious. We'll discuss his difficulty. He's got a little difficulty.
And in its latest immigration crackdown, ICE has announced it has arrested 11 Iranian nationals over the last 48 hours or so, including one former Iranian sniper and a man with admitted ties to Hezbollah. But the Department of Homeland Security says none of these people are suspected of any terrorism-related crime, none of them tied specifically to any sleeper cell. The point here is to show that they are doing everything they can to keep even suspected terrorists out of American communities.
All right, Garrett, thank you so much. Now, in the Middle East, that fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran does appear to be holding this morning. Comes after President Trump issued strong words to both countries yesterday, accusing each side of violating the agreement. NBC News chief international correspondent Richard Engel has the latest from Tel Aviv.
Israel is quickly springing back to life. While this ceasefire for now is holding, Israel has lifted restrictions on public gatherings. There was a semi-state of emergency here. That is over. And now Israelis are coming back onto the streets. They're going to cafes. The beaches are open. Flights are being put back on at the airport, because the Homeland Command said that Israelis no longer need to stay indoors near their shelters because the Iranian ballistic missiles are no longer coming in. We're not hearing sirens anymore, and Israelis hope that this can last. In Iran, there are also celebrations. Iranians are going out into the streets to celebrate what they are calling their victory over the United States and Israel. Even though the Iranian military was badly damaged, the nuclear program set back clearly, Iranians are saying because they were able to stand up to the joint might of Israel and the United States, and we're still standing at the end of it, that is a victory. But there are questions in this country, questions around the region. Will this period of peace and relative hope last? Or is there a new round of fighting ahead? There are these lingering questions about how much of Iran's nuclear program was really destroyed. And there is an open question about 880 pounds of uranium that Iran enriched to about 60%. The Iranians say they removed that more highly enriched uranium, 60% uranium, from their nuclear facilities before the United States attacked. 60% enriched uranium is not enough, not pure enough to make a nuclear weapon, but it could be used to make a dirty bomb, a radioactive bomb, although there's no evidence to suggest that Iran is actually doing that. When asked about this missing or unaccounted for uranium, President Trump said that he's confident it was destroyed, that the Iranians wouldn't have had time to move it out of their nuclear facilities. It would have been dangerous for them to handle this material, and that they wouldn't have wanted to stay in those sites for long, knowing that the Americans were on their way to destroy them. But there are other suggestions that the material is at large, and this remains an open cause of concern.
Richard, thank you. Here in New York, the progressive state assemblyman, Zohran Mamdani, has taken a huge step toward becoming the city's Democratic mayoral candidate. Mamdani declared victory after grabbing a commanding lead in the early stages of yesterday's primary. His nearest rival was former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo was the frontrunner throughout the campaign, but ended up conceding the election last night. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda joins us with more on this. Emily, good morning.
Hey there, Joe. Good morning to you. Well, former Governor Andrew Cuomo had name recognition, financial backing, major endorsements, but New York City favoring his 33-year-old, more progressive opponent, Zohran Mamdani, whose success could write a new playbook for the Democratic Party in the wake of losing the 2024 presidential election.
Overnight, a political earthquake in the race to become the next mayor of New York City.
Tonight, we made history. In the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done.
33-year-old Democratic Socialist and New York Assembly member Zohran Mamdani taking a clear lead in the primary and declaring victory over former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Tonight was Assemblyman Mamdani's night, and he put together a great campaign.
Mamdani was polling at just 1% a few months ago, but gained prominence online with viral videos and a strong debate performance.
I have never had to resign in disgrace. I have never cut Medicaid. I have never stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from the MTA. I have never hounded the 13 women who credibly accused me of sexual harassment. I have never sued for their gynecological records, and I have never done those things because I am not you, Mr. Cuomo.
For Cuomo, it's a major setback in what would have been the start of his political comeback, nearly 4 years after resigning in disgrace as governor following allegations of sexual harassment that he denied. Mamdani ran to the left of Cuomo, focusing on affordability and pushing populist ideas, including free public buses, rent freezes, and city-owned grocery stores funded by higher taxes on the wealthy. Endorsed by Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Mamdani's success signals a potential ideological and generational shift within the party.
The mayor will use their power to reject Donald Trump's fascism and to govern our city as a model for the Democratic Party. A party where we fight for working people with no apology.
Now, the city will still have to wait at least a week for the official results of the Democratic primary. But Mamdani, if elected, who, by the way, would become the first Muslim mayor of the city, he is poised to take on now the current mayor, Eric Adams, who is running as an independent after the Trump administration's Justice Department dropped corruption charges against him. Joe, by the way, Cuomo could still throw his hat in the ring for the November election on an independent line, so much to watch for.
We'll have to see what happens. Emily, thank you. This morning, we are finally seeing just a bit of a break in what is now a deadly heat wave that has covered the eastern half of the country this week. Missouri is reporting one heat-related death as officials across the U.S. continue to issue warnings and alerts about these dangerous temperatures. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock has the latest.
Hi there from a sweltering Manhattan. Just to give you a sense of how hot it's been, roads across the country are buckling. Rails are too hot for trains, and the electric grid here has been so taxed that the group that oversees it is pleading with people to please conserve energy. In all, more than 60 cities across the country have now recorded record highs, including right here in New York. For huge sections of the East Coast, it's been a sweltering start to summer, leaving many Americans from Boston to the Big Apple trying to manage.
It's very hot. We feel like we're melting.
Really, really hot and really, really humid.
You checked your phone a second ago. What'd it say?
101.
More than 60 different cities recording record highs yesterday, topped by Newark at 103 and Manchester and Boston at 102. In all, 150 million under heat alerts Tuesday, stretching from Maine to eastern Texas. New York's record 99 at Central Park, partly explaining the plea from utility companies like Con Edison.
So our general request to customers during these periods is to use energy wisely. Things like set your thermostats to a comfortable temperature, but not too cool.
The rising temperatures taking a toll on firefighters in Norfolk, Massachusetts, who suffered heat exhaustion.
We had a couple firefighters, unfortunately, overcome by the heat that we had to transport.
And heat-related illness also to blame in Rhode Island, where at least 10 cases were reported at Narragansett Town Beach. While in South Carolina, 20 people were evaluated and a dozen sent to the hospital while swimming in water that was struck by lightning. Everybody is expected to survive. Elizabeth Johnson's son was among those injured and witnessed the terrifying strike.
The biggest thunderclap, lightning, it was just very scary and traumatic. It hit the water, and then everybody started screaming and freaking out.
Even commuters dealing with more than a few snags, dozens of buckled roads, forcing drivers to slow down. Families not letting the brutal heat brutalize their vacation plans.
They've been asking for ice cream like 24 hours a day, so I didn't budget enough for our ice cream on this trip, but we'll do the best we can.
Now, while the worst of the heat wave does appear to be over, it's far from done. We are expected to challenge records again today
from New York all the way to Virginia. The high forecast here in the city, 96 degrees. And just for some historical context, JFK yesterday recorded a 102-degree reading. That's the highest June reading since the airport was built in 1948. Back to you.
All right, Sam, thank you so much. Ooh, 96, a cool down, Michelle Grossman.
I know, right? Who needs a fan today?
Yeah.
Hi there, Joe. Yeah. And as Sam mentioned, we're going to start to see some relief, but we will see record highs once again today. Yesterday, that was the peak of the heat. We broke so many records. We counted 55 yesterday, 63 the day before, and we're going to break more today. So that continues to be the big weather story by far. We're looking at that heat wave once again, and then a big difference as we go throughout Thursday and Friday. We're going to look at the chance also for severe storms throughout portions of the southeast and also across parts of the Midwest. We have a stationary front that's kind of lingering there. It's parked over this area, so we could see some heavy rain there. That could lead to some flash flooding. Same story in New Mexico. We're looking at monsoonal flooding there. We've had rain there over the past couple of days. So the heat alerts, we're looking at 124 million people stretching from portions of the Midwest into the southern plains, back to the Carolinas, the mid-Atlantic, up to New England. And we're looking at extreme heat warnings once again today. So heed all the warnings that we've been doing over the past couple of days. Find shade, air conditioning, go to the movies if you don't have your air conditioning, or places like that, some cooling centers. So as we head throughout today, we're looking at temperatures soaring into the 90s, near 100 degrees in many spots. But notice the box on the right. That's a really important number because that's the heat index. That's what it means to our body or what it feels like for our body. So you want to dress for those numbers. It's going to feel like 108 in D.C. today, feeling like 109 in Charlotte, and it's going to feel like 104 in St. Louis. That is today. Look at tomorrow, a big difference in spots. We're looking at Boston, 70 degrees, 77 in Erie. Still warm, though. We're going to have a boundary that's draped right between, clear to see where that boundary would be. We're looking at south of that boundary, still warm, 95 in Baltimore, 90s in Raleigh, Louisville, Kansas City, and also Little Rock. And then closer to average as we head towards Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. New York City really stands out to me. Friday, 70 degrees, 79 on Saturday, and 80 degrees on Sunday. Burlington, Vermont, same story. But we're going to keep it warm throughout the South. Nashville, temperatures in the 90s all throughout the weekend. Now, these summer storms, we're looking at the heat. That's going to spark some storms. So we're looking at heat and humidity-fueled storms in the east. A severe risk from Raleigh, North Carolina to Tallahassee, Florida. It's really scattered. You can see some brighter colors on this futurecast here showing us that we could see some heavy downpours in spots as these storms move through. And then tomorrow, we're going to see showers and thunderstorms cooling off the northeast. We're going to see a big area high pressure move in. That's going to bring in some cooler air off the ocean, but gusty storms rumbling into the Midwest. So very semi-like, of course, and also some storms being fueled by this warmth.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much. Sure. Appreciate it. This morning, 4 private astronauts are headed to the International Space Station after lifting off on a SpaceX rocket at 2:31 a.m. Eastern Time. This mission, though, is different because the company behind them, Axiom, is building its own private orbiting space station. NBC's Tom Costello covers space and has more on this new chapter in the new space race.
Yeah, this is the future of space. As the International Space Station is decommissioned by 2030, private commercial stations will create kind of floating research and science outposts in low Earth orbit for countries, companies, universities, and Axiom will likely be the first.
Ignition and lift.
Roaring off the same launch pad that sent Apollo astronauts to the moon, the Axiom 4 crew on board a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket early this morning.
For 3 nations, a new chapter in space takes flight. Godspeed, AX4.
The launch delayed by a week due to what NASA described as a leak that needed to be addressed on the space station's Russian module. The Axiom 4 astronauts include former NASA chief astronaut Peggy Whitson and 3 new astronauts from India, Poland, and Hungary. But Whitson is a space rock star.
Good morning to you as well.
Already holding the American record for the most cumulative time in space, 675 days. Commander of the space station twice with 10 spacewalks under her belt. Having seen Earth from the space shuttle, a Soyuz spaceship, a SpaceX Dragon, and the station.
You never say never. I left NASA not ever expecting to fly in space again, and here commercial space industry and Axiom Space has allowed me that opportunity in just a few years from my retirement from NASA. So things are changing very quickly in space.
Very quickly. This 2-week mission will focus on 60 scientific studies from around the world. But this is Axiom's ultimate goal, to build the first commercial space station dedicated to making medical and science breakthroughs in microgravity. The Axiom station will start by attaching a module to the ISS as soon as late in 2026, then eventually separating and floating free on its own, a sort of floating science lab for the world. Axiom 4 scheduled to dock with the station tomorrow, 7 a.m. Eastern Time. And this mission is getting huge attention overseas with the astronauts from India, Poland, Hungary, a source of great pride for those countries. Back to you.
No doubt, Tom. Thank you so much. For more, let's bring in retired NASA astronaut Eileen Collins. She's the first American woman to command and pilot a spacecraft. She's also the author of the book, Through the Glass Ceiling to the Stars. I love the title of that book. Eileen, good morning. Good to have you with us. So let's talk about this ambitious new project. We just heard there, things are changing very quickly. Axiom building the first commercial orbiting space station. What does that tell you about where the commercial space industry is right now?
Well, I really think for the United States and our other international partners to succeed, we have to do this commercial endeavor that we're doing. Of course, NASA built the space station, and now that we have proven, we as NASA have proven to the rest of the world that we can successfully operate in the space station is a national laboratory. We can do that successfully in space at lower cost and with lower risk. Therefore, we've got the commercial companies coming in. Now, if commercial companies take over low Earth orbit with this research, NASA can spend its limited funds exploring the moon and Mars. And that's what we're doing as a country in the Artemis program. And that's coming next.
Let's talk about this mission 4. The launch faced several delays. It was scrubbed liftoffs because of weather, but also there was that liquid oxygen leak with the rocket. Then we had air leaks at the International Space Station. The assumption is they took off. They feel good about the safety, but would there be any reason for concern?
Well, I'm concerned about the leak. I don't have all the very, I want to say, detailed technical information that the NASA engineers have. But what concerns me is that there are engineers at NASA that are still concerned about this, and we're not getting answers from the Russians the way I'd like to see it. Maybe I don't have privy to that information, but I do see that the Russians are confident that this leak that's happening is safe. And the leak rate has changed, by the way. It started about 5 years ago, very, very small. They can't see it, although the cosmonauts have done spacewalks to try to plug the leak, and it hasn't worked. But then the leak rate came down later for some reason. So there's a lot of things we don't understand about it. And I can't help but think about that submarine that collapsed a couple of years ago. I don't think that's going to happen to our space station, but that still lingers in the back of my mind. I worry about about structural things like this. So, you know, I think it's something that we need to keep an eye on. I don't think that mass media has really covered this at all, but I think it is a concern that we should keep an eye on.
Once they do reach the space station, we mentioned they're going to be doing close to 60 experiments looking at things like the effect of microgravity on the brain, the impact of space flight on the growth of crop seeds. We're tight on time here, but any study excite you most?
Yeah, there's a couple. I'm going to mention the cognitive tests that they're doing, because I think that's, you know, our psychology and how does our mind change in space? I take the NASA cognitive test every year, and it's tough. So let's see if space changes that. Oh, one other real quick, they're doing a study on diabetes to see if people who have diabetes can safely fly in space. And there's many others, and I think I'm really excited to see the outcome of these tests.
Fascinating stuff. Eileen Collins, good to have you with us as always. Thank you so much. Let's talk about a different kind of travel. The summer travel season off to a record-breaking start. TSA announced it saw the busiest day ever this past Sunday, with nearly 3.1 million travelers passing through America's airports. Millions more are expected during the upcoming 4th of July travel rush. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa joins us now from Chicago's O'Hare, which broke its own record on Sunday. Maggie, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning. Yeah, apparently added to the list. TSA says roughly 114,000 people passed through this airport alone on Sunday, the most ever. So the question now is, what do these historic numbers mean for the 4th of July and overall summer travel forecasts?
This morning, as summer temperatures heat up,
so does America's love for summer travel. When you got here and you saw the crowds, what did you think?
We're not going to make our flight.
TSA announcing it set a new all-time single-day record, screening nearly 3.1 million passengers at airports nationwide Sunday, capping the first official weekend of summer.
I saw a lot of crowds and lines, and I said, oh, my God, they leaving and I'm coming in. Thank you, Jesus.
The agency now bracing for a staggering holiday surge. It expects roughly 18.5 million passengers to fly around the 4th of July. The busiest day, Sunday the 6th. One factor, industry analysts say, the 4th lands on a Friday, making for an easy 3-day weekend.
4% more flights take off over the long weekend, so thousands more seats added for Americans who are looking to get away.
The vast majority of those traveling for the holiday will be hitting the roads, whether leaving for the airport or another destination. Experts' advice, leave early to beat traffic.
We're anticipating that an additional 1 million people are going to be on the roads compared to last July 4th.
The travel spike marking a pivot in summer projections after airlines for months predicted a slow season, citing widespread worries about inflation and tariffs. JetBlue Airways CEO warned staff last week, even after cutting flights and other costs, it's unlikely the airline's operating margins will break even this year. Analysts with travel site Hopper say overall demand has flattened after its post-pandemic peak.
We consider normalizing after incredible and outsized growth in the previous few years.
But they add these latest record-smashing surges prove Americans' love for a summer getaway isn't going anywhere.
And quickly, a few summer travel tips. The golden rule for those flying: download your airline's app and sign up for cancellation and delay notifications. It's the fastest way to rebook if needed. And for those driving, especially given these recent heat waves, experts recommend remembering that blowouts can become more likely during the summer because hot roadways increase tire pressure. So check your tires for wear before you head out. And then AAA recommends packing an emergency kit, too. Things like jumper cables, water, snacks, just to be prepared, just in case. Joe.
All right, Maggie, thank you so much. Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now. Later in the hour, we are going one-on-one with the Duke basketball phenom, slated to top tonight's NBA draft. First, after the break, we are saying goodbye to an entertainment icon, teen heartthrob Bobby Sherman, gone at 81. The tributes pouring in to the late pop icon next. We are back with an NBC News exclusive on the ongoing battle at the border. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, has ramped up raids across the country. It's part of President Trump's push to deport migrants accused of violent crimes, the people the administration describes as the worst of the worst. But after months of aggressive action, new ICE data obtained by NBC News shows the agency has arrested only a small fraction of undocumented immigrants already known to have been convicted of crimes like sexual assault and homicide. NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley has more.
Good morning, Joe. So we are able to look at two ICE data sets. One we've obtained exclusively that gives a fuller picture into the problem that the Trump administration said it would solve by these mass deportations when they came into office. In September, the ICE under the Biden administration told Congress there were over 400,000 immigrants at large that were not detained by ICE that had criminal convictions. And of those, 13,000 of those, over 13,000, had known homicide convictions. At the time, then candidate Trump seized on that and criticized the Biden administration for not doing more on immigration, and they continued to vow to go after the worst of the worst. Well, we understand that since that point, ICE has arrested over 185,000 immigrants. That includes some arrested under the Biden administration, but only 752 of those had homicide convictions. In fact, only over 65,000 of those had any kind of serious criminal conviction, and that includes immigration violations and traffic violations. So what this data shows altogether is that if you're concerned about immigration as a national security or public safety threat, it is actually not the vast arrest the ones that we've seen across the country where people are being tackled to the ground. A lot of questions coming up now about ICE tactics. It's not clear that those tactics and the mass arrest and the increase in ICE enforcement is actually making a large dent when it comes to the numbers of known threats to ICE. And I talked to some ICE officials, current and former, about why that is. When we've seen so many people be arrested, ICE detention is at record capacity now, near 60,000 people, even though they're only funded for 41,000. Why is it that more of these hardened criminals, known murderers, have not been arrested? And what I'm told is that it's much harder to find people who have committed crimes. And in fact, some of the investigators from Homeland Security Investigations have been pulled off those cases to go make arrests in the streets. They're getting the numbers up. As you know, Stephen Miller told ICE officials in mid-May to increase ICE arrest no matter who it was, not just going after people with criminal convictions. They've also made the argument that anyone in this country illegally is a criminal. Even if they cross the border legally, if they no longer have legal status, they should be criminalized. But I think when you're able to look at these categories and see how many people were arrested by category, it's worth having a conversation about whether or not the tactics are actually achieving the goal of going after the worst of the worst. And so simply what this data does is it holds the Trump administration accountable on a key campaign issue as we continue to see these arrests ramp up across the country and in many cases cause protests like the ones we're seeing in Los Angeles. Joe? All right, Julia, thank you so much. Developing news now out of Ukraine, where officials say several people are dead after a Russian missile strike in the southeast. NBC News international correspondent Danielle Hamamdin joins us with that and other headlines around the world in 60 seconds. Danielle, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. It was a rare daytime attack in Ukraine in the region of Dnipropetrovsk. On Tuesday, Ukrainian officials say Russian strikes killed 18 people and injured 300 civilians, including 27 children, after the deadliest and heaviest shelling on the main city since the war began. A passenger train was hit, along with a kindergarten, schools, and a city hospital. In Kenya, thousands have taken to the streets to mark the one-year anniversary of anti-government protests that killed 60 people and saw demonstrators storm the national parliament. There was heavy security in the streets of Nairobi, police using tear gas to disperse the crowds, and so far, at least 10 people have been reportedly hospitalized for gunshot wounds. It's not yet clear who shot them. And finally, a 300-year-old painting in the famous Uffizi Gallery in Florence has been damaged. And Joe, get ready to shake your head. A tourist trying to take a selfie reportedly tripped and fell, leaving a hole in the portrait of a Tuscan prince painted in 1712. The tourist is said to have been trying to mimic the prince's pose when they fell backwards. We are running out of time, and that's a good thing because I don't want to have to comment on that story, Joe.
Yeah, we had the thing with the chair a couple of weeks ago. Now this, just stay away from the yard. Just be careful. All right, Danielle, thank you so much.
No selfies. No selfies.
Exactly. All right, this morning we are remembering the life of teen heartthrob Bobby Sherman, who has died at the age of 81. Sherman's family announced in March he'd been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. His wife says as he rested, she'd read him fan letters, which lifted his spirits. Earlier in his life, Sherman found fame. Later, he found a calling. He became an EMT who taught life-saving first aid to law enforcement officers.
In the 60s, Bobby Sherman's face covered more walls than wallpaper, with his dimpled chin and shaggy hair plastered on posters that blanketed teenage bedrooms everywhere. Discovered at a party when he was just 20, Sherman first found fame on the musical variety show Shindig. He was a regular on the charts with songs that defined bubblegum pop, like Little Woman. Hey, little woman, please make up your mind. And Easy Come, Easy Go. Easy come, easy go. Like so many artists of his time, he was also an actor starring in a popular TV series, Here Come the Brides.
You better start counting out that bonus money, Mr. Stemple.
Over the years, he'd make appearances on a number of shows like The Partridge Family and The Love Boat. But perhaps no cameo said more about Sherman's passions than this police training video.
I know. You want my autograph?
In In the 90s, he became a reserve police officer with the LAPD and later with the California Sheriff's Department. He was an EMT who trained other officers in first aid and CPR.
It was a labor of love, that's all I can tell you. I mean, I really enjoyed every minute of it, and I still do.
Sherman's wife, Brigitte, honored that service, writing, "He traded sold-out concerts and magazine covers for the back of an ambulance. He showed us what real heroism looks like, quiet, selfless, and deeply human." His dear friend John Stamos also paid tribute. From one ex-teen idol to another, rest in peace, Bobby Sherman.
And Stamos was actually an ambassador for the charity started by Bobby Sherman and his wife, a foundation focused on educating and feeding kids in Ghana. And of course, music is an important part of that program. Coming up, hoop dreams about to come true for the latest class of NBA hopefuls. The Duke superstar primed to be the league's top pick in tonight's draft. You're going to hear from him. Stay with us. Back now with a closer look at what's making news in the world of politics this morning, starting with Democrats on Capitol Hill who are outraged they have not yet received briefings on President Trump's handling of the conflict between Israel and Iran. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona has the latest from Washington. Mel, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Here's a look at some of the top political headlines. Congressional briefings on Iran have been postponed. The House and Senate were supposed to be briefed yesterday on the situation in the Middle East, but those briefings will now take place later this week to allow some of Trump's cabinet officials to return from the NATO summit. The delay, though, has enraged Democrats who feel the White House is keeping Congress in the dark on key foreign policy developments. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer called the postponement outrageous and evasive and is demanding better transparency from the Trump administration. Democratic Congresswoman LaMonica McIver set to be arraigned on federal charges this morning. McIver was charged last month for allegedly assaulting and interfering with immigration officers during a congressional oversight visit to a detention facility in New Jersey. The Congresswoman is expected to enter a not guilty plea. She has repeatedly called the charges political intimidation and says she looks forward to her day in court. And finally, Trump's big, beautiful bill is running into some big, ugly problems. Republicans are still bitterly divided over key elements of the tax and spending cut package, throwing their self-imposed July 4th deadline into doubt. But Trump is calling on lawmakers to lock in, quite literally, if they need to, saying no one goes on vacation until it's done. And that's what's making news in politics this morning, Joe.
Yeah, nothing motivates people more than threatening their vacation. All right, Mel, thank you so much.
That's right.
Later today, the eyes of the basketball world will be on Brooklyn, where the 2025 NBA draft is taking place. Former Duke star Cooper Flagg is widely expected to be picked first by the Dallas Mavericks. Today Show anchor Craig Melvin sat down with him just hours ahead of the biggest night of his life.
Cooper Flagg is ready for his moment. The former Duke star only had to play a single season of college basketball to solidify his status as the NBA's top prospect. Tonight, under the bright lights of Barclays Center in Brooklyn, he's widely expected to be picked first overall by the Dallas Mavericks.
What's going to be going through your mind when your name gets called?
My mind's going to be going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So I'm not even going to try and think about what's going to, what it's going to be like or what's going to happen. I'm just going to try and, be present and enjoy the moment as much as I can.
What's the one thing that you're most excited about?
I think just, sharing this moment with my family. I think it's a dream come true for all of them and me as well.
Do you think you'll be emotional?
I know my mom's going to be bawling her eyes out when my name gets called. I think my oldest brother will probably cry too. So,
but not Cooper Flagg.
I don't know. I thought about it a little bit. I probably will end up crying, but we'll see.
Tears of joy?
For sure.
Flagg's journey to the draft stage started in the small town of Newport, Maine. Population, about 3,000. His parents both played college ball, so for the Flagg family, basketball was a way of life.
You used to play one-on-one against Mom in the driveway.
I did.
Who would win?
So I never beat her, actually. I was up 7-6, and then she fell and tore her meniscus in our last game, and then we never played again. So I count it as a win, but because she forfeited and I was up, but she won't give me the win.
Well, she forfeited because she tore her meniscus.
Yeah, but I was winning.
The family rivalries, including with his older brother Hunter and twin brother Ace, drove him.
Anytime I step on the court, anytime I step between the lines and, start to, play, I'm just a competitor and I just want to win.
I saw it firsthand last summer when I went to Las Vegas for a story about the NBA stars on Team USA ahead of the Paris Olympics. On the court with LeBron and Steph Curry, a 17-year-old Flagg. He was on the team brought in to scrimmage America's best. His performance that day went viral.
What was going through your mind as you were playing with some of the greats of the game?
When I first walked into the gym with him, I was a little shell-shocked. I was nervous. Those were the guys I had been watching since I was a little kid. Like LeBron, Curry, KD. I think once I was able to get in the game and kind of, adjust and, feel the pace and what was going on, it was just basketball for me after that.
When you're not playing basketball, what are you doing?
I like to golf. That's kind of my de-stress, relaxation, sport, competitive thing that I like to do.
What is it about golf that you enjoy so much?
I think it's a challenge. I'm not great at it yet, but I think it's something that you'll stick with you for life.
Something else that may stick with Cooper Flagg for life? The honor of being selected #1 overall.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, Allen Iverson, LeBron James, all #1 picks. And soon we'll add Cooper Flagg to that list. What will it be like for you, personally, being listed with those previous #1s?
It's incredible, to hear your name among those type of people. So if I'm, blessed with that opportunity and, that is what happens, it's just a surreal feeling for me.
What would you tell that little kid playing in the driveway back in the day with Mom? What would you tell him, knowing this is how it plays out? I would tell him to enjoy his time being a kid. Appreciate the little things that you get to do and not having any responsibilities, and just really appreciate those moments because it really does go really fast.
And our thanks to Craig Melvin for that report. Keep in mind, Flagg is just over a year out of high school. He is still only 18 years old. In fact, he doesn't even turn 19 until December, after he makes his professional debut. Coming up, Tesla troubles, why the tech giant's Texas rollout of those long-awaited robo-taxis wasn't quite as smooth of a ride as many had hoped. Stay with us, that's next. We're back with the somewhat rocky launch of Tesla's new robo-taxis. The electric vehicle maker debuted its driverless taxi service this past weekend in Austin, Texas. But not even 3 days later, federal safety regulators were already getting involved. Video circulating online shows some of the vehicles driving in a chaotic manner. Reporter Sam Stark from our Austin affiliate, KXAN, has more.
A self-driving Tesla robotaxi drives down South Congress Avenue Sunday afternoon. It's a service years in the making. But autonomous vehicles are something people in Austin have started to get used to and are even enjoying.
It's nice that you don't have the Uber driver that talks your ear off or the Uber driver that plays music that you can't stand.
Elon Musk has said he has wanted to cautiously roll out the self-driving vehicles, prioritizing safety. He talked to CNBC about the plans last month.
We wanted to deliberately take it slow. We could start with 1,000 or 10,000 on day one, but I don't think that would be prudent.
Robotaxis were available on Sunday only to those who received a special invite and were operating only in this geofenced area. While the vehicles were self-driving, a Tesla safety monitor would sit in the front passenger seat for all of the rides.
All the pundits like myself have been saying there's no way that they were ready, and then they proved us all right by saying that there's going to be a person in the right seat.
Professor Missy Cummings, an expert and leader in autonomous systems, talked with me over the phone. Cummings is worried Tesla's self-driving technology lacks sensitivity.
I do not think it is possible for Tesla to ever have full self-driving capability, actual self-driving capability, until they get more sensors on the car.
Cummings said that Tesla robotaxis don't have something called LiDAR. That's a technology that uses lasers to detect surrounding objects. It's known to be very accurate, even in low-light settings, and is being used by other companies like Waymo.
If Tesla does not do this safely and is cavalier and kills pedestrians, bicyclists, people on scooters, then Waymo is also going to pay the price.
While the official launch for the service was on Sunday, Musk said some have already driven along Austin roads for several weeks without incident.
Our thanks to Sam Stark for that report. The federal government says it's assessing several reports and will investigate incidents involving potential safety defects. Staying with business headlines, Amazon is about to give its delivery network a major upgrade. CNBC's Savannah Henao has that and some other dollar-sign headlines in your Money Minute. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. Well, Amazon is expanding same-day and next-day delivery to more than 4,000 small cities and towns. The company plans to invest more than $4 billion to triple the size of its delivery network by 2026 and is recognizing growing demand for faster deliveries from rural customers who often have limited options when shopping online. Amazon reporting the number of items delivered same or next day has increased more than 30% in the past year. Samsung's latest Unpacked event is set for July 9th, where it's expected to show off a new premium foldable phone, but you don't have to wait until then. Samsung is offering a $50 credit if you fill out a pre-order form for the new device now. Though the credit, it can't be applied to the smartphone you're buying, but it can be used for anything else in the Samsung store. Now, you'll also be entered in a sweepstakes to win a $5,000 Samsung gift card. And Singapore plans to build thousands of new homes over the next decade plus, and it's part of the government's effort to meet rising demand for affordable housing. Now, they will be built in proximity to public transport and workplaces, and Singapore aims to have 80% of households located within a 10-minute walk from a train station by the end of the decade. Locals have traditionally avoided urban properties, and that's, well, due to higher prices and lack of amenities like schools, Joe.
All right, Savannah, thanks so much. Coming up, I'm taking a closer look at queer representation in Hollywood and speaking to the man behind a new film looking to bring LGBTQ plus stories back to mainstream audiences. That is next on Morning News Now. Finally this hour, in honor of Pride Month, we're taking a closer look at representation in Hollywood. The advocacy organization GLAAD recently came out with its Studio Responsibility Index, which looks at LGBTQ plus inclusive films. This year's study found that those films hit a 3-year low in 2024. Just under a quarter of major studio releases included LGBTQ characters, which is down nearly 5 points from the record high in 2022. Those numbers make films like the rom-com Things Like This even more important for mainstream entertainment. It premiered last month. We're going to chat with the writer, director, and one of the lead actors, Max Talisman, in just a moment. But first, a sneak peek.
I met a cute guy.
I have a date.
Hell yes, 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 yes.
Oh my God, are you okay? I'm fine. Oh, it's a beautiful and strange moment.
They seem to have a lot of those together.
And we are excited to have the star himself, Max Talisman, in studio this morning. Congratulations on the movie. Really enjoyed it. I mean, I know you've talked about the fact it can be hard enough to find gay leads in romantic movies, but you've said there are practically no plus-size leads in almost any movies. Talk about why it was so important for you to make this movie.
Well, you know, I think as a queer person, it's important through our whole lives that we want to feel reflected on screen. And for me, I just hadn't ever seen a plus-size lead on screen as someone who has a romantic interest. I had been lucky that I'd worked as an actor, but a lot of the time as the funny fat friend, right? And I was like, I can do that, it's fun. But I wanted to write something that, put myself more in the narrative and also put myself in a place to say, like, I deserve love too. This is something, that people like me deserve. And that's really where this idea was born from.
What's the response you've been getting? I have to imagine you're hearing from people who've said, I've never seen myself on screen before until now.
It's been honestly really overwhelming in the most positive sense. Like, it's the reason I did this. And so to get these, Instagram DMs or at screenings to meet people who, this film resonates in the way I was hoping, it's surreal, but it's exactly why I started this journey.
You mentioned how you always play like the funny best friend. You also always played straight roles until now. So what does it mean to finally be in a movie where you're the queer character?
It's funny because I never really thought of that, but like, it's true. I would always play straight roles. And I think, when I was writing something, though, I did have to lean into something that was a little more true to me as a writer. And that was something queer. But as an actor, it's my job to play whatever's put in front of me. And it's exciting to always get to bring someone else's vision to life as well. But when it was my vision, it was like, oh, this is going to be a queer vision, not something that I'd done before as an actor.
And that's the thing. It is your vision. You are the writer. You are the director. You're the quadruple threat. What was that experience like for you?
It was overwhelmingly positive. Like, it's one of the best. I mean, it's the best 18 days of my life, the best 3 years of my life doing, all of the prep, all the posts, everything. It's just been the best. But I haven't slept in 3 years, but it's all been worth it.
But it's all yours. You have full ownership of it.
Yeah.
I love that both characters are named Zach.
Yeah.
Z-A-C-K, right?
Yeah,
Not
C-K,
even spelled differently.
Yeah.
I think that's fun because you do meet these couples every now and then where you're like, oh, you guys have the exact same name.
Right, exactly. And I thought it was also such a good, quintessential rom-com setup, that they have the same name, spelled the same way. I wanted that to be the meet cute. And from there, we really can dive into all the things about this couple that make them special.
We mentioned the GLAAD Index, which just came out a few days ago, talks about seeing that representation dip down a little bit. What's your reaction when you hear that? Do you feel like things can turn around? I
absolutely think they can turn around. I think they should turn around. I believe that media should be representative of the human spectrum, and queer media specifically has so many places to grow into. There's so many different kinds of people in this world who deserve to have their stories told, and a lot of them are queer people. And so I hope that other voices get a chance to tell their stories, and I think that the industry really owes a responsibility to have those stories be told.
All right. Max Talisman, thanks so much for joining us
so
this
much
morning.
For having
Congratulations.
Me. Thank
movie,
you.
Things Like This. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.